everybody. Welcome to this month's Oracle Apex Office Hours. My name is Shakib Rahman, and I'm part of the Oracle Apex development team. I'd like to begin the office hours with some announcements and updates, and then we can get into the real show. So I just have a few announcements. First, a quick replay on last month's office hours. You can watch this at apexoracle.com/office hours, and this is all about the Apex 21.1 new release. So it discusses all the new features, what's sort of there in this release. So if you haven't already updated to Apex 21.1, this is a great summary on what's going to be there and a preview of the features you can use today. I'd also like to talk to you about the Apex 21.1 patch set. So it's just been a few months since this release, and we've already have our second patch set bundle. It was updated actually on July 12th, and when this patch is applied to your Apex instances, your version will be updated to 21.1.2. This is that new simple numbering scheme. You can download this via My Oracle support. A quick link to download to the download page is by going to apexoracle.com/download. You can see all the known issues as well. Just go to apexoracle.com/known issues. And one more note is that there is a new CDN. So the CDN URL is here. It's also on the download page as well. And this PSC, this patch set bundle, is just another sort of an iterative release of a number of bug fixes that we've discovered that, especially with Universal Theme, will make things a whole lot better. So if you haven't already applied this PSC, I would highly encourage you to do so. The next thing that I want to talk about is the new feature requests application. And before I go into a demo of this, I kind of want to talk about it a little bit. Now, we've always had this community application in the past, which was apex.oracle.com/vote. And, I think I'll be honest here, and I'll say that we haven't done a very good job of, going through that, the feature requests on that application and vetting them and actually marking them as if they have been delivered or not. So I think this is a fresh opportunity for us to begin again and, really listen to the community feedback, see what's important to them, and help, really get help from the community to help us prioritize what goes into future releases of Apex. So anyone can submit feature requests. And I just want to outline some of the process here. So we will have CAB members and influencers there to help us vet and refine these features, add additional content to them. The process for features will be such that once a feature receives a certain threshold of votes, so in the beginning, it'll be 25 votes, but once a new feature hits that number of votes, the feature will move to under review. After that process, our PM team will review these features, and we will flag them as either they can be done, and we will target them either for an upcoming release, let's say 21.2, 22.1, whatever, or it might be targeted for a future release. Once the feature has been delivered, it will be updated to delivered, so you can see immediately, which features do we actually deliver. Not all features will make it, right? Like you may have all sorts of requests in there. We're not going to be able to do everything. For the features that are infeasible, or maybe they're not even a feature, there might be a bug report. Like this is clearly not the place for bug reports. That should go through My Oracle support or the community forums and other channels. But if there are features in there that we think are, make a lot of sense and there's a lot of demand for them and something that we can actually do, we would like to, review them and target them for either a future release or an upcoming release, and have that sort of back and forth with the community. So with that said, I'd like to go into my demo. And here we are. So you will access this application. And again, it's not live right now, but you'll access it by going to apex.oracle.com/vote. And one thing that we're going to be doing as well is taking into account all the features that have already been requested on that website, and we're going to vet them. So we'll probably start with like the last 2 years of features, and we will vet them, categorize them, and so on. But you'll be able to access all the feature requests on this single Apex application. And from the get-go, you see a search field. You can start searching for features that you might be interested in. You'll have a number of facets here you can sort by, so you can see all the new features that came in, all the ones that are targeted, delivered, things by different categories, and also things that you have voted for or your own feature requests. Here, I can also sort things by activity, top features, like here's all the new features that came in. If I wanted to go and request a feature, which I'll do in just a minute, you'll be able to actually go and enter these form fields yourself. you can attach screenshots, and I'll show you that in just a sec. One thing that's really cool about this app, and I'm really proud of, is that this entire experience is going to be, ideal on mobile devices as well. So just to kind of show you how this is going to look, right? You can access this anywhere, and you can contribute to the discussion. All right, let's go and submit a feature request. So this is going to be one of mine. So I'm going to pick a category here for a universal theme. And the feature request that I have is, allow using CSS variables to customize UT components. When you're adding this feature request, you're going to see a couple of things here. You're going to see, this placeholder template here. And this is a rich text editor. You can format this. You can add bullets and so on. So for example, here, my feature summary is going to be, I'd like to be able to use the colors from Theme Roller in my Apex app via CSS variables. The use case here, this is going to describe like what problem this is solving, right? It's not so much what the feature is, but it's like, why do you want this feature, or what problem does this feature solve? So for me, I'll say, sometimes I build custom components. So I build, I develop custom components where it'll be nice to have access to the same CSS variables to customize them so it fits in with theme. All right, I can fix that. Again, this is all going to be rich text editor. So for example, custom plugins, custom templates, etc. If you have a preferred solution, or you think you have a way to implement this feature, feel free to put that in. I don't really have one right now, so I'm going to leave that blank. And I'm going to go and request this feature. All right, the feature's been requested. Now, currently, I'm already like an admin in this app, so you'll sort of see like the Apex team flair here. But if you post a feature, the first thing, you will go to this page, but you'll see a banner at the top of the page saying that this feature is not yet been published. So you'll be able to access it, but no one else will yet until a member of the Apex team goes through and actually vets this feature. And for this level of vetting, we're just making sure that there's no, nothing inappropriate on there, and that the feature generally makes sense. Once the feature has been posted, one thing you'll notice is there's this big number, the FR1654, right? That is the feature request identifier. So if you want to share this on Twitter, for example, you can click on the share link and you'll see the same identifier right here. When let's say we target this feature for a release, or we deliver this feature, we're going to update our release notes and actually mention the feature requests which have been implemented, and give a shout out to the person that posted this feature in the first place. And of course, if I want to copy this on Twitter and share it, we've got this nice short URL, apexoracle.com/vote/the feature number, and you can post it on social media or whatever you like. You can also add comments here. So one thing I didn't do is I didn't attach a screenshot with my feature. So if I wanted to show that, for example, let me go into my favorite app, apex.oracle.com/ut. And then if I go into, all right, so let's go into reference, and then I'll go into, let's go into color modifiers. This is a good one. And what I want to say is, hey, I'd like to have variables for all these. So I'm going to take a screenshot, okay? Go back to my feature request. I'll say, for example, I'd like to have variables for these. I paste in my screenshot, and then I post my comment. And there we go. So because I posted the feature, it already has a one upvote, right? Because I posted it, so I want to have a vote here. And that's it. That is the process of posting a feature. I can also see other features I've created. So I can see, my feature request. And here's one that I also posted earlier. The same concept here. On the right, you'll also see the people that have voted for this feature. So you'll see all the names, and you'll see this little red block that indicates that this feature is from someone within Oracle. So you see the red square for Oracle. If it's a community member or somebody in the cab, you'll see another icon, and it'll clearly identify, sort of who is voting for this feature. And this will allow you to have a discussion here as well. So that's the feature requests application. One more thing as well is when you're posting a feature, for example, I have something for Page Designer. What we will do as well is we will show you some search results as well. So if let me go pick this, let's say Page Designer. If there was a feature about it, ignore that. We will show you other similar features as well. So the idea is that, hey, your feature may already have been covered here. If not, no worries, go back in. So that's the feature requests application. Let me go back to my slides. Just to kind of recap a bit, anyone can submit feature requests. You can upvote features. You can discuss these features. You can attach screenshots for the feature or the comments. You can easily share these things. You can see a clear status of the feature. So if a feature has been marked as targeted or delivered for release, you'll immediately see that. And really, the ultimate goal of this application is to establish this back and forth with the community and ultimately make Apex better. So this is coming next week. I was really hoping that we'd have it today for this release, but there's a little bit of final finishing touches remaining. So we'll have this out next week, and I can't wait for you guys to go and use it. With that being said, I'm going to pass it over to Karsten. He's going to talk all about REST synchronizations and automations. So I'll pass it over to you, Karsten.
Yes, Shakib, thank you very much. Warm welcome also from my side to today's office hours. And the topic is, as Shakib was saying, we will be talking about background activity in Apex. And so especially Apex 20.2 brought a new, let's say, class of features you can now use to execute some activity in the background. And especially this is two pieces. One larger piece will be the topic of REST source synchronization, which I think is a very nice complement to the REST functionality in Apex, and which can be used to resolve a lot of common issues you get when you start integrating foreign data sources into your Apex application. And the other one is automations. And if some time is left, we might also have a look into a third one. If the time doesn't fit, I would just post or would just share a link with you. So let me first share my screen to get started. So I hope everybody can see my screen okay, and see that about Karsten Zarski with the map. So a few words about my person first. I'm Karsten Zarski. Those who have seen office hour sessions before have probably seen me talking already. For the others, I'm with Oracle since 2001, so quite some time now. And after working a while for the pre-sales team in Germany, I joined the Apex team back in 2016. This is 5 years ago now. And since then, I'm working on several topics, among these REST data sources, data loading, and a lot of other things. If you want to get in touch with me, you might do this via email. So it's always easy to send an email to an Oracle person. That's first name dot last name at oracle.com. And in most cases, this just works. Twitter is also possible. And I'm also active on the Apex discussion forums from time to time. So there is a way to get in touch with me. If you have something, feel free. Okay, what do we have? And I would first like to talk a bit about REST synchronizations. All right, and we have REST data sources in Apex for quite some time now. They were introduced in Apex 18. And what they bring is declarative access to an external REST API. The whole idea of a REST data source was to get rid of this basic stuff like doing the HTTP request, parsing the JSON, and getting out columns and data types. This is all done by Apex in a declarative manner. And the Apex component, the report, the chart, just works with the REST data source as it was a plain normal table. And all that low-level work is by Apex, so you can really work on a higher level. And you can use a REST data source in the meantime for all Apex components. So when we introduced that back in 2018, the first release introduced the read-only support. So reports, charts, the calendar, those components would work with REST data sources, and read-write components like forms or interactive grid came in a bit later. Forms were added with 19.1, and interactive grids were added with 19.2. And the next big step for REST data sources was 20.2, and when synchronizations and a few other things came in. So having a chart or a report directly on an Apex or a REST API is a nice thing. And you can really accommodate the situation that the Apex application is here, but the data is scattered between other databases on the internet, ERP system, and is pulled in using REST API. But at the end of the day, this comes at a cost, right? It's not the same thing as having everything in a local table. So the first thing, which probably everybody already noticed who was working with REST APIs, is that the page performance now depends on the REST performance. So you have your page with your chart. And in the past, and that's the beauty of Apex, we all love, when we run the page with the chart, the data is in the same database, Apex executes the SQL, it's all quick and snappy. Yeah, with REST, it's not the case anymore. Apex reaches out to the REST API, the data is downloaded, parsed, and then it builds up the chart. So what if the network is slow? What if the REST API is not available right now? What if other clients are hammering the REST API and it just becomes, it's just slow? Then the chart has to wait until all the data comes back, and your Apex page becomes slow, right? Of course, you can always improve performance of your REST API, but sometimes that's not possible. And what to do now? Other issues, other challenges, let me put it that way, are if you want to aggregate the data from the REST data API. So you want to summarize things, you want to count, to group. It's not a table, right? All the stuff which is in the Oracle database, indexes, analytic functions, an optimizer, which always works on picking the right way to execute that count or sum or whatever functionality, that's out of the game, because the data comes from externally, a JSON comes in, has to be parsed, and then the database can start aggregating. And if you get into the pagination thing, then large amounts of data even need to be downloaded page by page, which makes things even slower, right? So in all these cases, it's not always the case, right? In many cases, many use cases, including the REST API, just works fine. But sometimes we find ourselves in the situation that we actually would like to have the data from the REST API in our local database, right? And that should not happen when the end user accesses the page. We want to do that in advance, right? We want to do it in the background, maybe once an hour, once a day, and we want to do it declaratively. With REST data sources in Apex 18, even a PL/SQL API was introduced. So using the Apex exec API, you can access a REST data source with PL/SQL, download stuff and load it into your table. But it's still a lot of coding. Actually, we want to have that kind of stuff done declaratively without any code. We want to have the pagination done transparently. We want to support typical requirements like merge based on a primary key. We want to replace the content in our local table or simply append. We want to have it, as I was saying, on schedule, but we also might want to have it right now based on an API call. We log it, and all these typical things, which are actually not so hard to implement, but if you want to do it over and over again, it becomes boring and error prone. And so actually Apex should do that for us. And that's actually something which the REST source synchronizations in 20.2 provide to us, right? So here I have a page based on a REST API, and a tiny spoiler, this is another new feature for REST APIs in 21.1. So I will reveal it a bit later, but maybe a few can spot it early, right? So this is a report on the REST API. This is a map on the REST API. When we have a look into that page in Page Designer, let's have a look what we can see here. There is our report. We can see it's based on a REST data source. We have the map, and the map layer also uses the REST data source. And let me load it again to get an impression about the loading time. All right, then once more, it takes a bit, right? We can see there is some latency. And when I called it the first time after clicking the start button, it really took 5, 6, 7 seconds, right? Because why? Apex needed to reach out to the REST API, download the data, parse it, and provide it and display it using the report and the map. So let's have a look into the REST API. Components, to the REST data sources, and like in a cooking show, I prepared pretty much everything here so that I can really concentrate on the synchronization. So, and this is a URL on the internet which returns a file with some data about American cities. Right, you could see that on the map, and we can test the operation again to see what's coming back. And you could see takes a bit, and this is actually the data from that REST API, and the lat and long columns are computed by me, so I have added these as derived columns. Okay, so actually cities in the US don't change every night, right? So cities are founded sometimes, but it doesn't happen too often. Also, a city is not just shut down. At least I can't remember a city being shut down in the last, since I can think. So at the end of the day, there is actually no need to download this data with every page request. And I think that's the important thing here. When we access, and that's something we should keep in mind, when we access that, so the report on the page is directly on the REST API. So whenever the page is loaded, it reaches out to the REST API, downloads the data, displays as the report. You hit F5 to refresh the page, reaches out to the REST API, downloads data, displays on the page. We want to have, since cities don't change too often, at the end of the day, this is data we really can download, right? And if data is corrected from time to time, we can re-download it again. And that's where the synchronization feature comes in. So to the right, we see that manage synchronization task here. And here we can now configure the automatic and declarative synchronization of the data to a local table of our choice. So let me call this cities from REST API. This shall be my table. Save that. And right now, nothing happened, right? We just stored the information into Apex that this REST data source shall be synchronized to this table. Nothing more. The table doesn't even exist now. And because Apex never creates a database object without your actual permission, let me put it that way. So it says that table is not yet there, so you can't synchronize right now. So we would need to create a table first. And we can have a look into that show SQL. Make this a bit larger. And this is what Apex would do to create the synchronization table. We can clearly see all the columns from our REST data source, and also two columns from Apex, two technical columns, if you will, which memorizes the last synchronization timestamp. And if we have multiple steps, I will get to that in a few minutes, the name of that step. So, and with that, let me create a table. And now the table is there, ready for synchronization. The next thing would be to schedule synchronization. For cities, once a year would probably be sufficient, but let's do it every day at midnight. So Apex generates a scheduler expression, a calendaring expression for the database scheduler for us. So if you are familiar with the scheduler calendaring expression, you can also edit this and get your own. So maybe by day, so now this means at midnight, but only at Monday, Wednesdays, and Sundays. Right, so I can now save and run. So it will save the calendaring expression, and it also kicked off synchronization right now. And after a while, we see that we have one with our synchronizations, and the details tell us, oh, it invoked this URL, downloaded 8 kilobyte, and we got a status code 200. So this was successful, and it was 128 rows. So our table should now, no, not the synchronization usage, our table should now contain that data. And there we are. Data in our table. It now becomes a local table. So let me now go back to the application page in Page Designer. And I can simply toggle that switch to use the synchronization table for the report as well as for the map. And now Apex will not reach out to the REST API anymore and simply use the synchronization table, and you can, I think you can already see the difference, right? It came back instantly because it's just local data. And the data is a normal table, so there is no difference between having this setup or just querying the data from the local table. This was these from REST API. Right, so this is actually exactly the same thing. With the switch and the use synchronization table, you keep that information that it's REST-based in your application page, but technically it's exactly the same thing. Right, and we can see the sync timestamp here. And now we have that data locally, and with the synchronization schedule, it will kick off every day or every Monday, Wednesday, Sunday, and will refresh the data from the REST API. All right, let's have a look into another page where where I used the same thing and added a few bells and whistles. And this is the same thing actually. It uses another REST API. So we now have the earthquake REST service, the report again, the map again. And the last synchronization was 24 hours ago. So where do I have that information from? That's the first question. But before answering that, let's have a look into the REST data source as such, and let's quickly get an overview what's happening there. So this is the USGS earthquake, and it syncs to the earthquake sync table, 24 hours ago. And we have the data profile in the REST API with all our columns, all right? And we have the synchronization settings, where we have a merge even. So every earthquake has an ID. And when we do that synchronization, we actually merge the data based on that ID. So if the earthquake with that ID is already in my local table, it will be updated. Otherwise, it will be inserted, right? I didn't store a synchronization schedule. So this would be, if you will, an on-demand synchronization. And you can see I already had 2 synchronization runs, which happened yesterday. So let me now synchronize again, so that we have data for today. All right, let's go back to our page. And you can see the timestamp of that earthquake. And now we have the current earthquakes, and the synchronization says it's 15 seconds ago. Right, and quickly review the page. Did it really use the synchronization? Probably yes. Yeah. Here is, oh, the report even didn't. Yeah. It even didn't. That was the reason why it took so long in the first place. Right, and now it's using synchronized data. This one is interesting, right? Because when you are having a local copy of that data in your local database, we obviously show sometimes stale data to our end users, right? And the synchronization schedule, how often do I refresh the data from the REST API? That's a question which is totally dependent on your business requirements. So some use cases will require synchronization every 15 minutes, others once a day, others might even be sufficient to only synchronize every few months. And again, others might be sufficient or might be most appropriate to only synchronize manually on demand. Whatever you do, you will run into that situation that there is that one use case you didn't think about. The data is, let's say, an hour old, and the power user, which actually uses your application, needs to see current data right now. So for that reason, you probably always want to show the timestamp of that data. And so you want to have this one. So how did I get that information? Let's have a look. And this is a report. And we have programmatic access. There is a PL/SQL package to control REST source synchronization. And one function here is the get last sync timestamp. You pass in the REST data source, and the rest is just a bit of classic report tweaking. And that's how we came to the 44 seconds ago. All right, that was easy. So, and that package is part of the API documentation. Just open it up and review the documentation. You can see how it works. Then we have that synchronize now button. So let's say, oh, there was maybe something. I need to know how it was right now. So then you can call synchronize now. And Apex will synchronize the data right now, independent from the schedule you have configured. Now it's 5 seconds ago. And how did I do that? So we have that button here, and that calls a page process. And the page process calls Apex REST source sync.synchronize data. And you again pass in the module static ID, and then you're done. You're getting your data synchronized. So we can now also answer those questions. The last thing I would like to talk about REST data, about REST synchronizations, is how to deal with parameters, right? And I have a REST data source for this, and that's the movie database example. And the movie database example has a parameter, so I can let me simply show the page. So here is the movie database. So at the movie database, without the parameter, we see nothing. If we start searching for something, for Star Trek movies, then we get an unauthorized. Let me quickly store the API key. Credentials, and we have, let me quickly check which is the right credential. So here is my web credential, and let me now API key, and let me now use that one. So, and now we should see something. There is our data. So I need the parameter to actually get something back from the REST API. And you might have a REST service which works similar. So you want to synchronize data based on parameters. And that's where the steps came in. So movies table, let me again create the table. Let me create the table. Now we are ready to synchronize. And if I synchronize right now, right, we will get nothing. Right, it says 0 rows because without a parameter, we are in the same situation as with the report before. Nothing comes back, and that's pretty close to reality. So some REST APIs require to pass in a parameter, and that's what the steps are for. So we can add a step, and that is the search for Star Trek movies, and I'm searching for Star Trek here. Oh, let me add another step for Star Wars movies. And I'm searching for Star Wars here. Let me, we talked about earthquakes. Let me search for earthquakes movies also. Did I do that correct? Yeah, I did. And now I added 3 steps in. And if I now kick off the synchronization again, it's running for a bit longer because it has to call the REST API at least 3 times. And it's even doing a few things more. It's because that REST API supports pagination, as many REST APIs in reality also. And that REST API, that movie database REST API, returns data back in pages. So if you get 100 results, then you have to request 5 pages with 20 rows per page. So it's important now that our synchronization calls or fetches all these pages and follows the pagination from the REST API correctly. And that's what it does here. So if we look into our log, then we can see the earthquake executed 3 requests. The Star Wars executed 8 requests even to get back 143 rows, and the Star Trek executed 6 requests to get back the 106 rows. And that ties into another new feature in Apex 20.2, and that is the REST source plugins. Because before 20.2, Apex was indeed only able to fetch the first 20 rows of that movie database, because Apex had no clue how to access the second page. How should Apex know what the correct URL parameter is? It's page for the movie database API. It might be result underscore page for another API. There is no standard on this. So with Apex 22, we added the ability for you guys to offer plugins for your REST APIs, and the plugin adds the knowledge to Apex to follow the pagination. And once that logic is there, once Apex knows that, synchronization transparently picks that up, and it will, without you having to do anything, it will just fetch all the data returned by the REST API. Right? And so in our table, we see all the data for our synchronization steps, right? And if we do count rows, we see 303 rows, which is the sum of the 3 synchronization steps. Okay, that was a roundup on synchronization. A few final thoughts. I already talked about programmatic access. There is the Apex REST source sync package, and there is the synchronized data procedure, which you already have seen in action. That was when I hit the synchronize now button. And you have also seen the synchronization steps, which I added to the synchronization. And in that case, I hard-coded the movies I wanted to search for. But what if you can't hard-code them? What if the search terms are in your table? Then you would use dynamic synchronized data, which doesn't require you to create a step in application builder. You can just call dynamic synchronized data. You pass in parameters, values for the parameters, and Apex would synchronize with the parameter you passed into that procedure. And that gives you great flexibility, and you can synchronize with whatever parameters you like without having to predefine anything. Another thought is on export import. A few people ran into this. You already have seen what a synchronization is, right? We have a local table, and we are actually downloading data into that local table. And now let's assume we export and import the application from one workspace to another workspace. So, and then many people are keeping versions of their applications, right? So if they have a next version, I've seen super often that the old version is kept in the target workspace and the new version is installed besides the old version, right? And then the alias is changed, and yeah, let's keep the old version for a while. So what would happen, right? We would have 2 synchronizations firing onto the table in parallel, and that's for sure not what we want. So to play it safe, after an import, synchronizations are disabled, and you need to call the Apex REST source sync.enable or reschedule to activate it. And that's a great opportunity to add to supporting objects. So it's just something you need to do something here, right? By default, don't worry if your applications don't run after importing. You have to enable them. Of course, you can also just go to the builder page and enable it here. Okay, so much about REST source synchronization. The second topic I brought is automations. And that's another piece of background activity in Apex, right? The synchronizations was very tailored towards the use case of downloading REST data from a REST API. And I intentionally really had it as a big topic here, because in the last few years, I really learned that downloading data from a REST API is a super common use case, right? At Oracle internally, I can't even count the question how often we have seen that people want to download data from a REST API to a local tailor. And that was the reason why that feature is there. And that was also the reason why I had it so prominent here in this session. But there is another feature in Apex which is about background activity, and that is automations. And automations is sometimes referred as an easy interface to the database scheduler, and it is that, but it is even more, right? So it's not just the UI equivalent of kicking a scheduler job off. It's a very nice combination of a standing query, if you will. So you have a query, that query returns results, and then we execute actions based on the query results. So it's even more than just kicking something off. It's indeed the combination of a query with actions, and that is executed based on a schedule. And how does this look like? We have a declarative specification of a query as the data source, a schedule, how often is that being executed, and a set of actions, which is today 21.1, which is basically pure SQL code. We are adding declarative processes over time. So, and based on the schedule, at some point in time, the automation execution is due. So now it's time to execute the automation. So what does Apex do? Apex executes the query, walks through the result set, and for each row, based on the condition, it will execute the defined actions. And if defined, we have ramp up and tear down code and query results. So the columns of your query are passed to your action code as bind variables. You have a log, you can write to the log. And as for synchronizations, you have programmatic access with Apex automation. And there is a log where you can review what actually happened. And again, we have a demo for this. And I prepared, of course, again, a bit. And the automations you will find in shared components. And then there is the automations section. And I already have one automation prepared, which provides a little bit of demo. We can look into that in a minute. I would first like to introduce the wizard to create a new automation. So first you would start giving it a name. Then you can pick between on demand and scheduled. On demand means I intend to call this only with API calls, right? Scheduled, we have again the integration with the database scheduler, and based on what you defined, the automation will kick off every now and then. Yeah, then we have actions initiated on a query or without. You can also work without a query. So this is the most simple interface to the scheduler, right? You define schedule, and then you will have an automation action, which is called once, and that is your pure SQL block. And then you have a declarative, a UI equivalent to the scheduler. We don't want this. We really would like to work on a query. So, and we execute that on the hour. And now we can pick a data source. So one option would be, for instance, to do select star from end and to execute my actions for each row of the M table. But that's not all, right? Apex reports can use REST sources. Apex charts can use REST sources. Why not using a REST data source, right, as my automation source? And here we now have the data source, and the data source returns columns. And here I would have my action, and now I can call, for instance, come on, my cool package dot procedure. Then you would simply pass columns from your query in as it was bind variables, right? Right. And then it would call for every row from the REST API, it will call your procedure, and that procedure does whatever it does. Okay, let's have a look into a prepared example. This is probably something which is interesting for many of you. Here I have an automation which runs every hour. And this automation queries the Apex workspace activity log. And it's hourly, right? And so this one is not correct. So, and now this would pick all application or page views in the last hour, not for the Apex Builder pages in my workspace, which have an elapsed time of more than 5 seconds. So you want to know which pages have been performed slow. And for those pages, you would want to happen something, right? Something should happen for those. So this is our query. Let's see whether this query actually returns a result. Yeah, we have one, and that was the beginning of my session. So that's good, right? Let's have a look into the automation action. And here, yeah, what I'm now doing is just send out an email with PL/SQL. And you might want to look up responsible people for the application to send the email to the right person. You want to have a more sophisticated query than my one, but the basic idea I think is pretty clear, right? We execute, we determine something with a query, and if we find something, we send out, we action on this, and in this case, we send out an email, right? And at the end of the day, for each automation, we can have cleanup initialization code. This is executed before all the action happen, before the query is executed. We have teardown or cleanup code, which happens after we are done. And in that case, I have the Apex mail.push queue added to my teardown code. And this is actually more for demo purposes. If you have that for real, the automation runs in the background anyway. So you might also be able to wait those 10 minutes until the mail queue is pushed anyway. All right, let's run it one time. So, and that should send out an email to myself. And let me, so I can now open my email. Will it open? There we go, and we should see that email in a minute, right? And here is the email with exactly that row we have seen before. And of course, we could use email templates here. We could do a bit more advanced stuff, but a very tiny use case which brings immediate value is to have some monitoring in place, which for the most important application, which sends out an email on things happening, right? You could also look for error messaging, for slow pages, whatever you like, right? You could test for specific users accessing your application if the privacy rules allow that. So a lot of stuff which you can do alone on the Apex Workspace activity log. Okay, so much about automations. A few thoughts, additional thoughts for export import. We have the same situation as for synchronizations. Automations are disabled. And for the same reason, right? The automations are part of your application, and people who are importing automations one after the other and having multiple versions of the application in their workspace. In those cases, we want to avoid multiple automations running simultaneously. And same thing, by default, disabled after import, use Apex automation.enable or reschedule to explicitly activate it. Or you can simply go, you don't have to do it with PL/SQL, right? You will find the automation in a disabled state, simply set it to active, and then you should be done. Okay, another, so that's all about automations. And as a final thought, so if you have requirements to implement background logic and you find, oh, the synchronizations are nice, automations are also nice, but doesn't fit my use case, right? I really need to have something handcrafted, and you want to get a hold on the scheduler directly. So you want to kick off your own job with your own things. Everything is on my own. I want to be the one in power. We have a blog posting in place for quite a while now, right? And here we explained how you can kick off a scheduler job from an Apex page process, right? How to pick up or how to implement a progress bar. So if you want to do it all on your own, right, this blog posting, and you can find it on the Apex blog. That's the normal blogs.oracle.com/apex. You need to go back in time a bit, but there you can find this how-to, which really explains how to work directly with the scheduler. But my recommendation would be, before doing that, really have a look into what Apex can do for you declaratively, and that saves you quite a lot of coding, right? And I think that's pretty much all I have for now. Not sure whether we do a Q&A or how.
Yes, we do. So first of all, thanks, Carsten, for this session. I do have some questions. So there's one here. It's probably an easy one. What is new in 21.1 from 20.2 for REST synchronizations?
REST. So I think, yeah, I didn't tell that. You're right. And maybe some people have seen that this REST data source with the cities, you might remember, there was that tiny hint all over the place. It said city CSV, right? So here is the new feature. I'm pretty sure many people in the audience noticed that. But for everybody else, REST data sources can now work with CSVs. And when you combine that with the synchronization feature, thinking about having a CSV file somewhere on the web, on object store in the Oracle Cloud, then this combination of feature gives you sort of an external table in Apex, right? An automatic synchronization, some CSV somewhere, and you can use fully declarative features to not only to reference that, but only to download that if you wish.
All right. The next one is, will you make this demo app available on GitHub or someplace?
We can make this demo app available. At the end of the day, I have to say it's not too much value in it. So it's a slide, it's a replacement for the slides. And yes, I can make that available. I would extract the API key again, of course, but we can have a look into how to make this demo app available as materials for that office hour sessions. We do with slides, so why not do with that application as well? So stay tuned, we will find something.
That's good. I have one more question. Do you have any ideas on how to automatically check if a given REST API has changed in any way so that you can go and then update your Apex REST sources? There's any ideas?
That's actually a different thing. That's a tricky one, right? Because the key thing with REST is, and that is also, I talked about that pagination thing, right? That's the reason why we have the plugins. One of the key things about REST is that it's not well standardized. The only thing which is standardized with REST is HTTP, get, put, post, delete. That's the standard, right? Everything else is whether it's JSON, XML, what's in the JSON, what's the structure, how does pagination work, does it use limit, offset, page, per page, results page. All these things are not standardized. And I think everybody has seen that in their daily practice. Deal with 5 REST APIs, find 10 different ways of doing things. So, and the same, of course, is true. What if the structure of the REST API changes? What if data changes? Actually, there is no standardized way to find out. And I'm open to all ideas in that regard, as soon as we have a hook into how to detect that, right? I'm the first one who starts implementing that in Apex. We have plugins which at runtime allow you to tailor your Apex integration towards your REST API. Really detecting, oh, things have changed here is a difficult thing. And I think at the end of the day, it will come down to a solution specific to the REST API you're working with, because what's working for OData won't work for ORDs and vice versa.
Okay, and one more. Can you use synchronization with REST APIs that return nested data?
Not yet. Right? Nested data is something which is not supported declaratively in Apex. So the whole story about REST data sources is that all the stuff is done declaratively. Not yet was a bit too harsh, probably. There is some limited support. So you can tweak the data profile in your REST data source definition. And for instance, if you find a nested table, you can map that attribute as JSON document. There is a data type for this. And then it won't project these individual columns out. It will just store that JSON snippet, which contains the nested table, along with your master data. That's one option you can do. And then you could synchronize. Supporting nested data in REST data source is a thing which is on our roadmap, which requires just a bit of conceptual thinking before. How do we want to support this? For instance, just a bit of thought for everybody, right? And do you want to flatten it out? Do we want to have two nested data profiles, right? It's a lot of things to consider in that case. And we have to answer these questions. We have to gather your requirements. We have to answer these questions conceptually, and then we can start building that feature. But it's on the roadmap. We are discussing it every now and then. And let's see when we get to actually doing it.
Very good. One more. I schedule a REST job every 15 minutes. And if my first job runs for longer than 15 minutes for some reason, will the second job start or wait for my first one to complete?
No, it won't start. It doesn't just kick off a synchronization as a scheduler job and forgets it. So there is a bit of infrastructure in Apex for this. And Apex, if one synchronization job is running, no other synchronization job can run. And so in the worst case, if let's build an example in our minds, right? You have a synchronization which runs hourly. The job takes a bit more than an hour to run. Let's say just 61 minutes, just 1 minute more. But that will lead to an effective synchronization of every 2 hours. You missed the train, so you have to get on the next one.
Very good. We have 3 minutes left. There's one more question I want to ask. Do automations use DBMS scheduler if on-prem and then cloud scheduler if on cloud?
So they use DBMS, it generally works based on DBMS scheduler, but if you look into the scheduler dictionary reviews, you won't see the jobs. So all the jobs are owned by the Apex engine. And for the technically interested among us, there is one master job, which runs very often, very frequent. I think it was every 2 minutes. And that master job looks, oh, which automations are due right now? And if it finds a due automation, it will kick up of an executor job, right? And that executor job will only execute that one automation, and then it will die again, right? And so it is scheduler job. It's all based on the database scheduler. But if you query user scheduler jobs in your workspace, you won't see anything because all the jobs belong to the Apex engine.
Got it. And one last one just popped in. It's from Dave. Is there support for HTTPS, SSL data sources?
Yeah, of course. So on premises, you have to make sure that all the wallet stuff is properly set up in your database. So you have to have the wallet, and you need to configure that on your database, on autonomous database, on cloud services. This is typically all done for you. But once that is properly set up, HTTPS should be no problem at all. If you have, there is a blog posting on how to set up the wallets. Just Google a bit for Apex HTTPS wallet. You should find it very quickly. And that explains everything.
All right, great. Hey, thank you so much, Karsten. Thanks everybody for attending this office hours today. Next month's office hours will be based on universal theme. So it'll be Tim and I speaking about what are the changes in universal theme, what sort of this refactor means with all the CSS variables that's coming in, that's there in 21.1, and a sneak preview into what's coming in 21.2. So that is next month. Thank you again for attending, and I hope you have a good day. Bye.